6:08 p.m., August 4, 2020. Wedding photos near Beirut port. People heading home after shopping. Firefighters responding to a port warehouse fire. 0.2 seconds later, in an instant, people, buildings, and vehicles were swallowed by chaos. A crater 140 meters wide was formed. Energy equivalent to 1,100 tons of TNT exploded. Windows shattered simultaneously within a 10 km radius. Shockwaves reached Cyprus across the Mediterranean. The scenes of the explosion had been sown 6 years prior. September 23, 2013, the Moldovan vessel MV Rosus anchored at Beirut Pier 9. Beirut was not its original destination. En route from Batumi, Georgia to Beira, Mozambique. An engine defect occurred during the voyage. The vessel sought the nearest port for repairs. And that was Beirut. In the cargo hold of the Rosus, 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate were loaded. The shipment was destined for a Mozambican company. Ammonium nitrate, also used as fertilizer, is usually stable, but under specific conditions, it causes powerful explosions. A prime example is the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. About 2,300 kg was used at the time. The building's facade collapsed, killing 168 people. The amount on the Rosus was about 1,200 times that. Repairs were completed, but the ship owner faced a problem. Beirut port authorities blocked the vessel's departure. Port fees and various expenses remained unpaid. The ship could not leave until they were settled. The owner could not pay the port fees. The Mozambican buyer also refused the shipment. As the situation grew complicated, his solution was chillingly simple. He abandoned the crew, the ship, and the cargo. November 2013, the Lebanese court officially seized the MV Rosus and its cargo, with everything legally frozen. 4 crew members were left in darkness without electricity. They had to wait in poor conditions until the issue was resolved, running out of money, food, and water. 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate lay beneath them, under the scorching heat of Beirut. Wellish 10-month detention on board continued. Among the crew were Ukrainian nationals, with help from Ukraine's foreign ministry, and lawyer Charbel Dagger in Lebanon. They finally left the ship in August 2014. Early 2014, the port faced a new problem. Due to long neglect and lack of maintenance, the Rosus was at risk of sinking in the dark. A sunken ship would disrupt all port operations, and dangerous cargo could be submerged. October 2014, authorities decided to unload the 2,750 tons, moving the ammonium nitrate from ship to shore. The cargo was moved to warehouse 12 in Beirut port. Just 85 meters away stood a massive 48-meter concrete grain silo. It held about 85% of Lebanon's grain reserves, a key facility for the nation's food supply. Warehouse 12 was not built for dangerous goods. It was just another warehouse, used for temporary storage of cargo. Formally temporary, but actually neglected. Lebanon's political structure was the backdrop. 18 religious sects coexist in Lebanon. Power is shared through confessionalism. President, Maronite Christian. Prime Minister, Sunni Muslim. Speaker of Parliament, Shiite Muslim. Under this structure, operation rights for ministries, agencies, and ports were split according to sectarian interests. Customs monitored, but had no authority to dispose. Port office stored, but had no authority to scrap. Ministries received reports, but had no authority to command. Risk was identified, but when a decision was needed, no one was institutionally empowered to make that decision. Within this structure, Warehouse 12 was quietly neglected along with 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate. Half of the cargo entered Warehouse 12. Lebanese customs recognized the danger of the material, but the problem was they could not take action. Between 2014 and 2017, Customs Director Tavik Mahai sent 6 official letters to the judiciary, and the message was consistent. The 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate in Warehouse 12 pose a serious threat to the port and city. They requested to auction off or export the cargo. They warned of an irreversible accident if left alone. But there was no response from the judges. All 6 letters were ignored, with no response sent. Passed to other agencies, or delayed due to jurisdiction issues. There was a reason for such problems in Lebanon's judicial structure. Courts were trapped by decades of backlog cases, political pressure, and a judge appointment system driven by sectarian interests. If a judge made a politically sensitive decision, they could become a target and face career setbacks. Disposing of the chemicals in Warehouse 12 was entangled with various political interests. No one wanted to be the one to make the decision. Thus, the 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate remained under review on paper. In reality, it lay dormant in the warehouse, utterly neglected. Around 2018, the danger inside Warehouse 12 escalated further. Port authorities began storing other seized goods in the same warehouse, which included approximately 15 tons of fireworks. The fireworks were seized contraband and were piled in the same space without any disposal plan. Ammonium nitrate and fireworks were left together long-term. Fireworks are flammable on their own, and ammonium nitrate can trigger chain reactions from heat or shock. Having these two materials in the same space was like keeping a spark that ignites with one mistake and a bomb that causes a massive blast from that spark together inside a single warehouse. According to the records, safety inspections at Warehouse 12 had virtually stopped. As the 2019 economic crisis began, the national budget was slashed, the Lebanese pound plummeted, and prices soared. The government focused on cutting public service costs. Maintenance of monitoring personnel and security equipment naturally had to be suspended. The World Bank ranked this economic crisis as one of the 10 most severe economic collapses since the 19th century. January 2020, Lebanon State Security inspected Warehouse 12 and issued an official warning report. The report stated that the security was vulnerable and management was being neglected, such as external intrusion or theft. It is known that concerns were raised about potential safety issues. And on July 20, 2020, to President Mitchell Aoun and Prime Minister Hassan Diab, a security report was delivered warning of the danger in Warehouse 12. This was 15 days before the massive explosion. Later, President Aoun revealed that he was aware of the report, but rather than giving a direct order to resolve it, he explained that he delegated it to the ministries. Blame games and administrative delays between agencies followed, and no practical action was taken. Late July to early August, 2 weeks before the blast, some attempts were made to repair Warehouse 12 walls, but delays caused the work to start and stop repeatedly. The 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate and 15 tons of fireworks remained. Only one thing remained: the spark. Similar cases have existed in history. In September 2001, an explosion occurred at the AZF plant in Toulouse, France. Various hypotheses were raised about the cause. Issues in chemical management and storage were pointed out. 31 people died, and over 2,500 were injured. Crucially, the response differed from Beirut. Immediate investigations and legal procedures began in France. Legal rulings on liability and compensation followed. The 1947 Texas city disaster is a key case comparable to Beirut in scale. 581 died as ammonium nitrate on a cargo ship exploded. The U.S. overhauled hazmat maritime regulations. This change helped establish international standards. As a significant turning point, while those cases were unannounced accidents, Beirut's danger was known for years, making it fundamentally different. August 4, 2020, 5:40 p.m., smoke began rising from Warehouse 12 in Beirut port. During repair work on the warehouse walls, welding sparks likely ignited flammable materials inside. Reports say that inside the warehouse, beside ammonium nitrate and fireworks, tires and oil and other flammables were stored together, and the fire spread rapidly. At 6:00 p.m. sharp, Beirut firefighters arrived with a team of 10. They were informed only of a port warehouse fire, but unfortunately, the 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate in Warehouse 12 was never reported to the firefighters on site. Administrators and port management with records and security authorities gave no hazmat info to the team. And so, they marched into the heart of the fire at 6:07 p.m. Fire spread to the 15 tons of neglected fireworks nearby from across the port. Citizens watching the scene began filming with their smartphones. The fire footage spread quickly on social media, but at that moment, no one knew. that the flash was heating 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate. 6:08 p.m. The ammonium nitrate reached its critical point. It causes a rapid decomposition reaction above a certain temperature, releasing massive amounts of high-temperature gas. With blast impact and intense heat applied, it shifts to a chain explosion or detonation. Detonation propagates faster than the speed of sound, releasing energy as powerful shockwaves. Asked seismic network. Detected a magnitude 3.3 earthquake in Beirut. It was about 1.1 kilotons of TNT energy, about 1/13 the power of the Hiroshima atomic bomb. Non-nuclear, but enough to destroy a city. The crater 140 m wide and 43 m deep formed at ground zero, and Mediterranean seawater flowed into the crater. Most port warehouse facilities were destroyed, and nearby anchored vessels capsized. Nearby grain silos were also destroyed. Loss of stored grain stocks followed. Lebanon faced immediate food shortages. Shockwaves spread at supersonic speeds to Beirut. Windows within 10 km shattered instantly. Citizens were exposed to flying glass shards. Those sitting in offices, standing in living rooms, or inside shops were no exception. Many of the 6,000 injured were hit by glass shards. The shockwave reached Cyprus, located 240 km away from Beirut. All 10 firefighters on site were killed. Chaos broke out across Beirut. Hospitals kilometers away from the port had to treat the injured despite shattered windows. Jemese and Mar Mikhail were hit hardest, with walls collapsed and interiors destroyed. Rescue vehicles struggled to enter the chaotic city. Official records show about 218 deaths, 6,500 plus injured, and 300,000 displaced. Damage was estimated at $15 billion, roughly 25 trillion Korean won today, over half of Lebanon's GDP at the time. A giant crater filled with seawater replaced Warehouse 12, and the port ceased to function entirely. Lebanon, which relies on imports for 85% of supplies. The port's loss met an already severe economic crisis, leading to a national catastrophe. Global aid and rescue teams headed to Beirut. French President Macron visited Beirut 2 days later, with international aid promises following, but no outside help could repair the scale in the short term. 6 days after, on August 10, 2020, massive protests spread across Lebanon. Protesters entered several government offices. Hundreds more were injured in clashes with police. PM Hassan Diab announced his cabinet's resignation. In his resignation statement, he stated Lebanon's corruption was the bigger problem. In August 2020, Lebanese prosecutors detained dozens involved in the blast. This included port, customs, and security officials. In December that year, prosecutors charged the ex-PM and 3 ministers. Legal actions began, but investigations repeatedly stalled. Summons were issued for current and former officials. Parliament refused to lift high-level immunity. On October 14, 2021, protests in Tehran demanded Judge Bitter's removal, and clashes between armed groups killed 7 civilians. Investigations faltered and fully halted in 2022. August 4, 2022, the second anniversary of the blast. Families gathered at the site for a memorial. When the north section of the grain silos collapsed, the structure was damaged in the 2020 blast. Weakened and barely standing until then. The collapse occurred on the second anniversary. Dust clouds billowed across the screen, and the mourners fled the scene. The government tried to demolish the silos, but reversed the decision due to families' protests. Families demanded the silos be kept as a memorial. Lebanon's economy has worsened since 2020. The pound's value crashed 98% since 2019. Foreign reserves dried up, and banks froze withdrawals. The aid meant for the victims' families lost its value as the currency crashed. Many of the 300,000 displaced have yet to return home after 6 years. where warehouse 12 once stood, still remains a seawater-filled crater. July 18, 2019, 10:00 a.m. in a 3-story building in Fushimi, Kyoto. 70 staff members were busy at work. At 10:30 a.m., the door opened and a cart with 2 plastic cans entered. The cans were filled with 40 liters of gasoline. The man was Shinji Aoba, 41, from Saitama. Little time remained before the building turned to ash. Shinji Aoba was born in May 1978 in Saitama. After his parents divorced, he was reportedly raised under habitual abuse by his father. Welfare records and witness testimonies from that time showed repeated evidence of violence within the home. Ultimately, his unstable childhood experiences persisted emotionally into his adulthood, leading him to a life of crime. On June 20, 2012, Shinji Aoba was arrested for convenience store robbery, and the court sentenced him to 3 years and 6 months. Some traces of his life in Ibaraki were found during the probe. Little remained of his social ties or specific actions. And in January 2016, he completed his full sentence. Soon after, he began living at the Saitama Probation Center. During this time, he submitted his own work to the Kyoto Animation Award for novels. Thousands of manuscripts are submitted every year, with winning works considered for animation projects, earning it a high reputation among creators. His submitted work failed to win the award, and no records exist of his reaction right after. However, later psychiatric and trial records show this moment was the motive's core. They stole my novel's ideas, the starting point of his delusion. The rejection turned into a conviction that his work had been stolen. The gap between the results and his belief remained inseparable throughout the investigation and the trial. Yet during the legal process, no evidence of Kyoto Animation using it was ever found. During his probation after release, Shinji Aoba could not maintain a stable job. Probation records noted his struggles with social adaptation and repeated instances of unemployment. A later psychiatric evaluation report described his consistent mindset during this period. Whenever failure or misfortune struck, he blamed external factors and cast himself as a victim of persecution. This delusion and victim mentality soon hardened into rage toward Kyoto Animation, and he began moving to carry out the crime. Kyoto Animation was founded in Uji, Kyoto, in 1981. They did not follow standard industry practices. Instead of relying on outsourcing from planning to the final completion, internal staff handled everything directly. Staff were hired as full-time to ensure stability, allowing skilled artists to build expertise long-term. In 2019, the first studio was a 3-story building in Fushimi, Kyoto. The interior prioritized a creative environment. From the entrance, a staircase piercing the center spiraled up to the 3rd floor without obstruction, and each floor had no walls or partitions, maintained as an open workspace designed for instant communication among staff. Aided smooth creative activities, but during the fire, it connected the building into a giant chimney, becoming a fatal flaw. Between July 15 and 16, Shinji Aoba left Saitama and arrived in Kyoto. He immediately bought 2 gas cans and filled them. The total amount reached 40 liters, 20 per can. He then walked around Kyoto Animation Studio 1, checking the entrance and surrounding roads, and the direction of the stairs. Parts of his scouting route were captured on nearby security cameras. A 20L gasoline can weighs about 15 kg. So he needed a way to carry over 30 kg of liquid. On the 17th, the day before the crime, he bought a cart and ropes for transport, secured 2 cans onto the cart with the ropes, and did a final check at a nearby park. According to police seizure records, 6 knives were found inside his bag at the time. Authorities analyzed these as weapons, prepared in case his arson was thwarted. At 10:00 a.m. the next day, Shinji Aoba set off toward the studio with the cart. 2 gasoline cans were tied onto the cart with ropes. Without rushing or looking around, He moved at a steady pace toward his target. On the day of the incident, Studio 1 had no access control from the entrance to the workspace. And with deadlines and visitors overlapping, it was left open for easy passage. At 10:25 a.m., he arrived at the entrance with the cart. And as the cans were left open, gasoline vapor began to spread into the air. Some noticed a pungent smell, but it did not reach the inner workspace. And 5 minutes later, he stepped inside the open entrance. Immediately after entering the lobby, he began pouring gasoline onto the floor, shouting "Die!" He lit it with a lighter, and the fire began to spread instantly. As the vaporized gasoline ignited, flames erupted simultaneously throughout the first floor, instead of spreading slowly. The entire space released heat explosively. Oxygen began to be consumed rapidly. The first floor entrance was the only path for outside air or oxygen to enter. As fire broke out at that sole passage, internal oxygen was cut off from the outside and consumed rapidly during combustion, where high concentrations of toxic gas formed. From that moment, the building's interior turned into an unlivable environment. Gasoline does not burn as a liquid, it vaporizes and burns when mixed with air. Ignition occurs once vapor density hits a certain level, known as the LEL, which for gasoline is about 1.4%. If 40 L of gasoline spreads in an air-sealed space, the entire indoor air within a short time can fill with vapor far exceeding the LEL. If an ignition source is added now, it is not just a simple fire spreading from a spot, but rapid combustion occurring simultaneously throughout, leading to a vapor cloud explosion. According to Japan's fire service records, toxic gas and smoke reached the third floor in just 15 seconds. The spiral staircase, opened vertically to the third floor, triggered the stack effect immediately, where heated air from below rises upward and draws fresh air in from underneath, creating a powerful updraft in the vertical passage. At this point, stairwells, elevator shafts, and vertical pipe ducts act as paths that spread smoke and gas to the upper floors in an instant. To block such hazards, modern designs include fire stairs and doors, and horizontal smoke barriers on each floor, but standards in the 1990s were less strict. And Studio 1 met the existing codes with an open spiral staircase design. According to Professor Nishino of Kyoto University, smoke rose at 3-5 m/s within 30 seconds of ignition, faster than an adult sprinting up the stairs, before those on the third floor could even react. The smoke had already reached them. Ultimately, given the gasoline vapor explosion and the stack effect, the interior could not delay the toxic gas or provide enough time to escape. Experts in fire safety agree on this analysis. The smoke that reached the third floor left no physical time for escape. Staff on the third floor began to move upon noticing smoke. The exit to the roof was at the end of the stairs. Opening that door would lead out onto the roof, allowing escape via nearby buildings or ladders. The escape routes to avoid flames inside the building were virtually only toward the roof, besides the first floor. Over 20 people rushed to the stairs leading to the roof. Meanwhile, high-temperature toxic gas rising up began to accumulate under the third-floor ceiling, and smoke in the stairwell fast approached lethal levels. Those who reached the roof door to survive desperately tried to open it, but due to the toxic gas under the ceiling, internal pressure had increased, with over 20 people crowded in the stairwell. Visibility was already almost entirely blocked. The door opened by pulling inward, but as the crowd rushed toward it, counter-pressure made it nearly impossible to open. The very force used to survive trapped them instead, preventing escape. According to Kyoto police autopsy records, in the stairwell about 2 m from the roof door, many victims were found huddled together. The cause of death was asphyxiation by toxic gas, since fresh air and safety were just beyond the door. This tragic news brought immense shock to many. While escape was blocked on the stairs to the roof, Some people made it out through third-floor windows, hanging onto window frames, jumping down, or trying to move to nearby structures. These scenes were reportedly witnessed from the ground. However, with internal oxygen already depleted and flammable gases accumulated, the moment outside air rushed in through the window, flames erupted explosively through that opening. It was the so-called backdraft. As windows opened, they became paths for pouring flames. At 10:30 a.m., the fire following the blast engulfed the entire building. Ialba Shinji, running from the flames, tried to flee, while some staff members followed in pursuit. 5 minutes later, he was found 100 m away in front of a house. Unable to move further due to severe leg burns, he lay collapsed on the ground. His entire body bore widespread burns from the gasoline he had scattered. Police arrived and secured him while controlling the scene. Lying on the ground, gasping for air, he repeated the same words to the police. Records show he stated, "They stole my novel." Black smoke still billowed from Studio 1 behind him. Fire trucks arrived within minutes of the start. The fire was out by 3:19 p.m., 5 hours later. The three-story building was gutted. Part of the concrete outer walls remained, with ash and melted metal structures inside. According to the fire department's final report, the incident left 36 dead and 33 injured. And Kyoto police began identifying the victims to officially release all 36 names, ages, and roles. It took 26 days, from August 2 to 27, 2019. Most were in their 20s to 40s. Animation, color design, background art, filming, editing, they were at their desks working that morning. Among those names, active since the 1970s, working on Grave of the Fireflies and Akira, was Kigami Yoshiji, who helped shape the animation system. Takemoto Yasuhiro, director of Harui and Lucky Star. Nishio Futoshi, character designer for Hyoga and Free, and Aite Shoko, who designed characters for Euphonium, were all included in the list, as they were key staff in Japanese TV animation. According to National Police Agency statistics, since the 2001 Shinjuku Kabukicho building fire, it is recorded as the single arson attack, with the second highest number of victims in modern Japan.
出動した部隊隊員全員がですね、一人でも多くの命を救うということで懸命に活動いたしましたけども、結果的に34人の方がお亡くなりになったということは大変残念に感じております。昼間の火災であれだけの規模で燃焼しているということが、私の経験からも今までないと、今回いろいろ報道されている中でやはりやりきれないというのは正直ございます。隊員が何とかならないというところでしたけれども、そこができなかったのは私も含めて全てどうかと思っております。
2 days after the incident, Kyoto Animation announced that global donations had exceeded 3.3 billion yen. Donations continued to pour in afterward, with the total reaching over 4 billion yen. Beyond Japan, US animation distributor Sentai Filmworks led a fundraising campaign, drawing donations from the US, Europe, and Asia. Kyoto Animation stated that these funds would support victims and restore production. The culprit, Aoba Shinji, was in critical condition with 90% burns. On July 26, a cultured skin autograft was performed in Osaka. A small sample of the patient's skin cells was taken, grown in large quantities to cover the burned areas. At the time, transplants on such a scale were rare within Japan, especially without using any donor skin tissue, using only cultured and artificial skin to save a severe burn patient was known as a rare case worldwide. This unusual measure was taken so the culprit could testify in court about his actions, decided by investigators and medical staff.
で、あと少なくとも4回は手術をします。分かった？頑張れる？頑張ります。はい、じゃあ頑張るね。
In April 2020, demolition of Studio 1 was completed. It took about 9 months after the incident over what should be left in its place. Kyoto City, Kyoto Animation, and families began talks. as formal discussions on a memorial began. The site remained empty on Sept 5, 2023. 4 years and 1 month after the incident, the first trial was held at the Kyoto District Court. Aoba Shinji admitted to the prosecution's charges, yet held on to 2 claims. I didn't think so many would die, and he never withdrew his claim of stolen novels. On January 25, 2024, the Kyoto District Court sentenced Aoba Shinji to death. The court recognized his full criminal responsibility and the intentional, planned nature of the killings. His claims of victimization and stolen novels were not accepted as grounds for reduced sentence. The basis for the verdict converged on a single point: months of preparation and the Kyoto site inspection, and the purchase of gas, carts, ropes, and knives proved that the crime was not accidental. Choosing the first floor entrance, the main air source, as the starting point of the fire was seen as a planned act to block escape routes. Right after the verdict, sobbing filled the courtroom. On February 7, 2024, as the defense filed an appeal, the case was moved to the Osaka High Court. However, in January the following year, the defense voluntarily withdrew the appeal, accepted as the defendant's own decision. The Osaka High Court ruled the withdrawal valid, and Aoba Shinji's death sentence was finalized. Since the incident, the Japanese government revised the Fire Service Act for purchasing gas in cans, mandating ID checks and records of the purpose of use. In July 2024, a 5th anniversary memorial was held. Messages from families were shared on KyoAni's channel, and new works by the surviving staff have been released. Despite the massive damage from the fire, certain concrete sections of the 3rd floor server room avoided direct contact with the flames, and data was found preserved in some storage units. Inside were original drawings and scenes in progress, including color files from just before 10:30 a.m. on July 18. Leaving behind part of the staff's final work records, recovered data and existing production materials were reused in Kyoto Animation's later works, and projects bearing the traces of the staff were eventually completed and released. Violet Evergarden, Eternity, and the Auto Memory Doll was already in the final stages of production, allowing it to be released as scheduled. Violet Evergarden, the movie, nearly cancelled, was continued by the remaining staff and materials, and was finally completed. On the memorial at the Studio One site, the names of the 36 victims were engraved. 3,800 m below the surface of the North Atlantic Ocean remains the remains of the most well-known shipwreck on Earth, the Titanic, which sank in 1912. To some, witnessing this firsthand was of little interest and a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to someone else. On the morning of June 18, 2023, after a long wait for billionaires, the craving began to become a reality. Titan received a signal of departure on the cold surface of the North Atlantic and began to dive, but no one was aware that the journey was heading in an irreversible direction. In 2009, Stockton Rush and Guillermo Sirline founded a company called Ocean Gate near Seattle. The idea of their business was simple. It was a commercial private deep-sea exploration that showed the Titanic debris directly to wealthy customers. The price of a boarding pass was $250,000, which was a whopping 330 million won in Korean won. The company's core asset was the Submersible. Ocean Gate developed Titan for the Cyclops series. The Titan was designed with a heterogeneous structure, with the front and rear ends of the hull in titanium and the center cylindrical section in carbon fiber composites. Carbon fiber is a material that is several times stronger than steel by weight, and it is a high-tech material mainly used in aircraft fuselages and F1 race car bodies. Ocean Gate introduced this choice as a technological innovation that has achieved both lightweight and cost savings. The important fact here is that carbon fiber is a very strong material for pulling force, that is, tension. However, it is vulnerable to loads that repeatedly compress and expand. The compression that occurs every time the submersible goes down to the deep sea, and the expansion as it rises to the sea level, causes delamination inside carbon fibers, and this phenomenon gradually accumulates as the cycle repeats. The cracks cannot be identified with the naked eye without looking inside using ultrasonic waves or X-rays, and it is impossible to know whether they are making it impossible to detect the progression of delamination. This is why the aviation industry must require NON destructive testing for carbon fiber fuselages, but this NON destructive testing was not done for Titan's carbon fiber hull. In January 2018, there was a person inside the company who had already documented the fact and submitted it to management. David Lockridge was OceanGate's Director of Maritime Operations at the time. January 2018, he submitted a report to management containing 26 safety issues of Titan design. Two key points in the report were the absence of hull and destructive testing and design flaws in viewport. According to the data, at that time, the pressure rating of the observation window was 1,300 meters deep, but the target point, Titanic, was about 3,800 meters deep. This meant that components rated for only 1/3 of the target depth were planned to be mounted and operated on the actual hull. Lockridge was fired from the company in the same year he filed his report. August 15, 2018, OceanGate filed a lawsuit against Lockridge, who had raised internal safety concerns for leaking confidential information and breach of contract. In response, Lockridge confronted each other in a counter-lawsuit, and his response specifically contained the company's suspicion of concealing carbon fiber defects. As the technical warning spread to a legal battle, the process effectively blocked the hull's internal safety review, eventually leaving no room for improvement and being buried below the surface. The warning was repeated outside as well. A group of Boeing engineers, NTS, and deep-sea exploration expert Rob McCallum demanded independent certification and compliance with standards, respectively, but OceanGate's official position was unwavering in the face of their demands. The founders argued that the existing certification system was an outdated regulation that could not keep up with the pace of innovation. However, experts' concerns, which have been raised continuously between 2021 and 2023, will remain only a record in the US. NTSB final report located in Maryland. After a load of 4,200 meters deep was applied, 11 additional test submarines were conducted in shallow depths. The man/a-man tests carried out at the time passed OceanGate's own standards. Since then, through 2022, Titan has undertaken a total of more than 80 underwater voyages, including the exploration of Titanic debris. On July 15, 2022, an abnormal signal from the recording device is detected at the 80th submerged position. A permanent numerical change signal was recorded in the strain sensor of the RTN system during its ascent following the Titanic survey. This meant that the submersible's carbon fiber delamination had begun. Fortunately, the submerged navigation was completed without any accidents at the time. But despite the apparent abnormal signal, OceanGate was more confident in the design safety of the submersible due to the safe return, foreshadowing the disaster that will occur soon. Titan's cockpit had a gaming wireless pad in place of standard industrial equipment. This was a commercial Bluetooth product called Logitech F710 that was sold for about $30 on the market. Rush directly introduced this as an example of cost-effective innovation in an interview. However, the NTSB points to a lack of real-time determinism. This can be fatal in the deep sea for systems that are vulnerable to signal interference and can delay command execution, leaving these design flaws questionable extreme environmental reliability. May 2023, Jay Bloom, a financial investor at Las Vegas, has finally rejected an offer to board a submersible. When he expressed his concerns about safety, Rush cajoled him via text, saying, "It's safer than crossing the street." Bloom felt the danger hidden in this overconfidence and eventually broke himself out of the expedition. And his intuition was accurate. Explorer Chris Brown and several other experts also left the project around that time. What they commonly perceived was a structure in which corporate decision-making took precedence over technical verification. On June 16, 2023, 9:31 a.m., the mothership Polar Prince departed St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada. The destination of the shipment was the remains of the Titanic, which sank about 3,800 meters below the water's depth. 2 days later, around 8:30 a.m. on the 18th, 5 people, including Rush and Harding, boarded the submersible. When Shahzada Dawood, his son Suleiman Dawood, and French deep-sea exploration expert Paul Henry Nargiel boarded, bolts were fastened from the outside. This meant complete isolation from this point when the doorway was sealed, that it was impossible to escape on its own inside the hull. At 9:18 a.m., Titan has started the descent. Acoustical link, a method of text communication using ultrasonic waves, rather than wired connections used in normal deep-sea operations or diving, was the only connection between the submersible and Polar Prince. This resulted in status signals being delivered every 15 minutes. For every 10 meters of water depth, the pressure on the outer wall of the hull increases by 1 atm. This will reach a load of 3,800 tons per square meter on the outer wall of the hull if it reaches the target point of 3,800 meters deep. This is the same pressure as the weight of 2,500 medium-sized cars weighed in all directions at the same time around a point. Around 10:47 a.m., the Titan suddenly dropped 2 lower iron weights at a depth of 3,341 meters while continuing its descent without any symptoms. This is believed to have been initiated by the occupants to secure emergency buoyancy, raising the possibility of abnormal noise or defects in the hull. The signal being sent to the submersible was last interrupted 47 minutes and 33 seconds. At the same time, a huge impact sound was detected in the polar prince hull several kilometers away. The acoustic energy generated from the seabed has been transferred to the surface of the water.
Yeah. It should be about 500 meters, 30. What is that thing? Drop 2 weights. Titan drop 2 weights.
Copy. Titan drop 2 weight.
17 minutes later, around 11:04 a.m., a single-shot signal was detected by the U.S. Navy's classified acoustic monitoring network deployed on the North Atlantic seabed. The same waveform was later identified in the U.S. NOAA underwater acoustic recorder. The signal was consistent with a catastrophic implosion. According to the U.S. NTSB report released on October 2, 2025, repeated submerged navigation accumulated the lamination inside the carbon fiber hull, causing structural strength to fall below a critical point, and when external pressure exceeded 350 atmospheric pressure, the hull collapsed inside. At that time, the speed of the collapse was close to the speed of sound, and the hull lost its shape in an instant, and the enclosed internal air was compressed rapidly toward a point under extreme pressure. Everything inside was as though it had evaporated under tremendous heat and pressure in just 0.02 seconds. This is 5 times the rate of transmission of nerve pain, which is 0.1 seconds, and it is estimated that the passengers were not even aware of the pain. The destruction was permanent, deadly, and irreversible. June 18 at 7:10 p.m., a missing Titan has been reported to the Boston Marine Rescue Center. It was about 9 hours after the last communication was cut off. In fact, the U.S. Navy had already detected Titan's implosion signal earlier in the day and was conducting internal analysis. But unfortunately, the data was shared with the search authorities after all the debris was found. Over the next 3 days, air power and ships from the United States, Canada, and France gathered in the area of the accident. C-130 transporters, P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft, sonobuoy tracking undersea sound, and Horizon Arctic, a deep-sea probe. The search range they went through totaled 10,000 square miles. It was a vast sea area, about 2.5 times the total area of Jongadu. June 20th, a Canadian CP-140 War A aircraft detected a repeated strike sound every 30 minutes. The noise gave a glimmer of hope to the search authorities, who had not been confirmed to be alive at the time, but it was later classified as a collision between Titanic debris or a mechanical sound of a search ship. Given that the U.S. Navy had already secured an implosion signal, the final judgment on whether the sound was indeed a survival signal remains inconclusive. June 22 at 1:18 p.m., ROV Odysseus 6K finally discovered the remains of Titan about 500 meters northeast of the Titanic. At the scene, fragments of the stern and hull capsules were scattered on the seabed at a depth of 3,800 meters. The figure clearly revealed the situation at the time where it was collapsed by high pressure. On the same day, at 4:30 p.m., the USC officially announced the occurrence of an implosion in the pressure chamber in the hull, pointing out that the accident was sufficiently preventable. Delamination, accelerated by repeated submerged navigation, was the decisive trigger for the collapse due to fatigue damage at carbon fiber and titanium joints and internal warning silence, which led to certification of international deep-sea exploration equipment and reorganization of operating standards. On April 15, 1912, it took 2 hours and 40 minutes for the Titanic to sink below the North Atlantic Ocean. 111 years later, on June 18, 2023, it took just 0.02 seconds for the Titan, which was heading down toward the wreckage, to be obliterated. Where Titan was heading was the wreckage of the giant ship Titanic, which had been built with the conviction that it would never sink. But ironically, it was human overconfidence that preceded technical verification that penetrated both events. The causes of the two tragedies were so similar that the gap of more than a century was overshadowed, and the gap was left as another record without narrowing at the end. August 5, 2010, edge of the Atacama Desert, northern Chile, 700 and below the surface. No earthquakes, and no official disaster alarms sounded. 700,000 tons of a massive rock mass shear off vertically, completely sealing the main shaft. People on the surface realized something was wrong only when a plume of dust rose from the mine. Even the number of those trapped remained unknown. For the next 70 days, no one knew if they were even alive. The San Jose mine in Copiapó, Chile, is located in one of the driest places on Earth, the northern edge of the Atacama Desert. The underground is rich in copper and gold veins. with mining routes dating back to the late 19th century. By 2010, it was an aging mine, over 100 years old. Geologically, the rock here is not uniform. Decades of mining left numerous hollow voids inside. A heavy, unstable layer of rock sat above these gaps. Warnings about the mine's structural risks had been raised for several years. In 2007, a fatal accident killed a miner, and the mine was closed. However, it was cleared to reopen just 1 year later. Critics say this coincided with rising copper prices, prioritizing production over safety. This tragedy cannot be explained by corporate greed or negligence alone. At the time, Chile's mining regulations relied on a self-reporting oversight system, with one inspector managing dozens of mines. July 2010, 1 month before the collapse, the sound of moving rock began to echo repeatedly inside the shafts. Miners shared these danger signs among themselves, and some reported them to their supervisors. But according to survivors, operations were not halted. As warnings and flaws accumulated side by side, the collapse 700 and below was drawing near. The San Jose mine was not a simple vertical shaft. A spiral road followed the steep slopes, allowing vehicles to reach as deep as 720 meters. Along this road sat an area called the shelter. By law, the shelter had to store food and emergency supplies at all times. However, on August 5, 2010, only 48 hours of food were found inside. This was never meant to sustain 33 men. The 33 men trapped underground included drillers, mechanics, and electricians. They represented a full range of roles essential to underground operations. Many were veterans with over 10 years of experience. This diverse expertise became their key to survival. Shift leader Luis Berzua, a former surveyor, could interpret blueprints and structural shifts. August 5, 2010, at 2:00 p.m. after their lunch break, some miners were just heading back into the shaft. Just after 2:00 p.m., an eerie sensation struck inside, before those above ground knew. Unlike an earthquake, survivors said, it felt like the entire mountain was crushing down. A deafening roar followed as dust and debris filled the shaft. An estimated 700,000 tons of rock slid down, blocking the main shaft. With the entrance sealed, miners gathered in the dust and headed to the shelter. Initially, they looked for a way to escape on their own. The blueprints clearly showed emergency ladders. But at 700 and below, the miners discovered that crucial sections of those ladders were missing. Rescue teams reached the surface that same day, but simple access proved impossible. The main shaft was already completely blocked, and after a second collapse during the rescue attempt, the teams were forced to retreat from the entrance. From then on, the only option left was drilling. Drill rigs began their descent, boring deep into the earth. But the first and second boreholes failed to reach the target. To aim precisely at a target 700 and below with a drill bit only inches wide was a high-stakes task where theory clashed with harsh geological realities. 8 boreholes failed, one after another. Miners hammered on metal pipes to send signals, but the sound died long before reaching the surface. August 11, families began to gather at the mine entrance. A tent city began to form nearby, later named Campamento Esperanza. Officially, the fate of the 33 remained unknown. To lead the rescue operation, mining engineer Andrei Salgarit was appointed. His first assessment was clear. Restoring the entrance was impossible. The focus shifted to finding survivors via drilling. Without any proof of life underground, he decided the operation must continue. While 8 drilling attempts failed above ground, the 33 miners gathered in the shelter below. Flashlight batteries were fading. The heat topped 32 degrees C, and humidity hit nearly 100%. Facing darkness, heat, and only 48 hours of food, Luis Berzua immediately began rationing supplies to stretch 48 hours of food as long as possible. Daily rations were cut to the absolute minimum. Every 48 hours, each man received 2 spoons of tuna, half a cracker, and a sip of milk. This grueling ration lasted for 17 days. Managing the lights was also critical. They hooked up truck batteries to cycle the lights, minimizing every bit of power consumption. They filtered industrial water from truck cooling tanks and based on the faint air from the vent. They decided where each man would sleep. For 17 days, their calorie intake was only a fraction at the minimum required for survival. The temperature and humidity were nearly at the limit for the human body to endure long term. Some showed signs of dehydration and mental instability. In that situation, the approach Louis Ursula adopted was not a chain of command, but a consensus system. Rationing, space use, and work shifts, survival decisions were discussed and decided by majority vote, which suppressed hierarchical conflicts within the group and helped maintain their psychological autonomy. But not everything was orderly. As the isolation grew longer among some miners, talk spread that the outside world might have abandoned them. No sound from the surface was heard, and no signal arrived. Darkness and silence lasted for 17 days. From the surface to a specific space 700 m below, to penetrate it with a drill only inches wide, was in a realm where reality deviated far more than theory. And there were three conditions creating that error. First, it was the geological non-uniformity. Hardness and density varied by section, causing the drill to subtly drift. And that error accumulated over hundreds of meters, expanding into a deviation of tens of meters underground. Second, it was the geological conditions of the San mine. The hard andesite layers rapidly wore down the drill bits, and in the empty cavities formed by mining. In some sections, the drill lost alignment and veered off course and drifted. Third, it was the absence of information. The precise coordinates of where survivors gathered were not shared, and existing survey records after the collapse could no longer be trusted. The 8 failed attempts were the result of these three factors. Saugar's team recalibrated by back-calculating each deviation, simultaneously launching three-way parallel drilling from different angles, activating what were called plans A, B, and C above ground. President Sebastian Pine revisited the site and publicly declared his commitment to the rescue, which was not just an explanation, but a premise. Effectively ensured the operation would not be halted. On August 22, 2010, an anomaly was sensed as the 9th drill bit was recovered. A plastic bag was taped with red tape to the drill bit, and inside was a note written in bold handwriting: "We 33 are all safe in the shelter." Day 17 of the collapse. This note was more than just a survival check. Miners saw the drill as a signal to find them, capturing that moment to actively seek communication. Families, viewers across Chile, and world media saw this survival note as an immediate emotional turning point, but for rescuers, it was a signal to start. Survival confirmed. The goal was no longer a chance, but a result that had to be achieved. Later, Saugar recalled that moment in an interview and said this: "The moment of reading the note, it completely changed to the question of how to get them out." After their survival was confirmed, the rescue operation shifted to a parallel structure, performing two tasks. One was those isolated 700 m underground, to sustain the survival of those trapped underground until rescue completion. The other was a passage of diameter for a person, securing down to that specific depth. For the first task, called Paloma, a supply tube of about 12 cm diameter was operated through the existing borehole. Food, medicine, communication devices, oxygen supply, and small cameras were sequentially delivered. On August 25, as the camera reached underground, live footage of the miners was transmitted to the surface for the first time. Drilling for the second task proceeded simultaneously from 3 directions. Plan A was a diameter expansion using a small drill. Plan B was a large rotary drill for oil exploration, and Plan C consisted of high-pressure drilling equipment. Plan B showed the fastest drilling speed and shifted to the main operation, but entering andesite layers in early September, speed dropped sharply. On September 17, damaged drill bits temporarily halted the operation, and emergency logistics were activated to secure replacement parts. At that point, the rescue team shifted to a long-term system, with psychologists on site. A daily communication protocol operated. Each person's psychological state, health, and family connections were closely monitored, and daily prayer broadcasts and family messages were delivered. Underground, voluntary discipline formed after mid-September. The 33 maintained an internal order as a single group. Simultaneously, a dedicated rescue capsule was designed, built by Chilean Navy technicians. Phoenix was a cylindrical structure about 54 cm wide and 4 m long, including oxygen, communication, and environmental controls. This capsule was designed with minimal clearance for the passage. The gap with the walls was only a few centimeters. On October 9, Plan B's drill connected with the miner's space at 622 m. Drill vibrations recorded on sensors confirmed the contact, but stabilization by inserting steel casing in the upper 96 m meant no immediate rescue occurred. The casing insertion took about 2 days. On the night of October 12, after final safety checks, the rescue start was set for just after midnight on October 13. This was due to unstable bedrock to remove falling rock risks during capsule movement. October 13, 2010, at 0:11, capsule Phoenix 2 reached the surface, confirming the first survivor. Florencio Avalos, in the best health among the 33, was chosen first and reunited with family on the surface. Later, the rescue proceeded maintaining a constant cycle. It took about 15 minutes for each miner to ascend 700 meters in the capsule, including medical checks and preparation for the next boarding, with each full cycle repeating roughly every hour. On the same day at 21:55, the last miner Luis Erzo reached the surface. As the shift leader, he chose the last turn, reporting the rescue completion to President Sebastián Piñera. The task is complete. We led 33, and all 33 have been delivered. The total time for all 33 to return to the surface was 22h37 Later, on October 14, after the 6 rescue workers supporting underground withdrew, Operation Phoenix officially ended. After the 22-hour rescue, media framed it as a miracle. But survivors faced long-term PTSD, fear, insomnia, social isolation, and complex issues. Some failed to return to their original jobs. Conflicts over films, media, and support funds followed. In 2020, a memorial was built on the mine site. The shelter is sealed with restricted public access. The red letter note delivered through the crew then is currently preserved in the National Museum of Chile. The San Jose mine where the 33 were isolated remains remembered as a miracle.